All right, let's talk about some really basic styling. So we're changing the color, right? The foreground color. We're changing the background color. We already took a look at some of those examples. Here's some underlines, italic, or bold of the text, right? Using the elements, or instead of using elements that are specific for styling, a better way to change that kind of styling is through using CSS rules, such as font weight. We can say bold. Font family, we can change it so that it's Courier or Arial or whatever font you prefer. Here we use Courier. The font size, we change it to 20 pixels. Notice that it only changed it for that one particular piece of text. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the box model. So the box model allows us to configure how every content is going to interact with every other piece of content. Right. Everything that is rendered on the screen is surrounded by this virtual box. Okay. That allows us to determine what the spacing is between this particular piece of content and our neighbors. Anybody who's near me, how far am I from my neighbors? That's called the margins. If there is any surrounding box around me, right, we'll call that the border. If inside of that box, right, there's any white space that in between that border and the actual content, and then finally the content, right? Right now we've only been talking about content, but all content has this virtual these boxes around it. Okay, and so let's see how we can use it to lay out different content. Right, so margin is the spacing between the boxes, border, the thickness, color, or style of the surrounding border, padding, and we'll talk about that. All right, let's also so we have this imaginary virtual box around every piece of content. The other rule important on how things are laid out on the screen is that every element can either behave as a block element or as an inline element, right? By a block element, we mean that it's going to take up the entire width of the page, right? Or at least the width of its parent container, right? Most of the time, the parent container is the entire window, yes? Okay. And so if the parent becomes smaller, then it will become smaller as well. Yes. Also, the other important aspect of block element is that it adds vertical spacing. So it adds breaks, a page break, right, or that pushes things, down, right, pushes things down or up, right. Examples of this are the heading and paragraphs elements that we've seen so far. We'll soon start using another one, a very generic block element called the div. The other element is the other type of behavior is that elements can be inline, right? They can flow with the rest of the content, right? They render from left to right, from top to bottom, okay? Just because in Western civilization that's how things are laid out, and things just flow from left to right, and up until there's no more space. When there's no more space, they just naturally just wrap and start again from the left and start flowing to the right. Yes? All right. So together, this behavior of block and inline, right, together with the box model, determines how everything else is laid out. Okay. Examples of inline elements, just normal text, right? Just plain text behaves inline. Just have the next element, the next character is laid out to the next characters, and the words just flow. Span, input fields, buttons, right? They all behave in this inline fashion. So here's just a couple of block versus inline elements. So we have here a couple of headers, paragraphs, normal text, and a span, right? And we'll see that the headers, notice what they do is that they take up the entire width, right? If I make it bigger, it also becomes bigger. Inside of the header, we just have plain text, yes? So inside of the header, we have plain text, which behaves inline, but the header itself becomes as a block, meaning it'll expand as wide as I can, right? And inside, the text behaves inline, right? Meaning that when it reaches the end, it just wraps, right? And then it continues. Okay? And also notice the break, right? There's a line break right over here, right? And it pushes the content below, again, because it's a header. Also the paragraph, same thing, right? There's a long piece of text, which takes up as much width as we give it, and the content inside is just plain text, which behaves as an inline, and it just wraps, right, to continue. Normal text outside of any elements behave as an inline. And then we have the span. Also, span behaves as inline. It's a generic inline element. Okay? Notice that we have span elements, even though we have a break here, and then we have render inline span. It renders all as a run-on. See that? Right, one after the other. We can change how things behave. Here's examples of changing color of the headers, of the paragraphs, of the span. Right? Notice that there's a break here of the white space in between the two spans. Here we have examples of not only changing the background color, right, of this particular span, we're changing also the border, right? We're changing the border. We're saying, hey, the border, we're overriding the default behavior of the border. We want it solid. We want it 10 pixels wide. We want it to be green, and then we have this border all around that element, right? And the color inside is red, right? Background red. Okay. There's two syntax typically for all these. Notice they all start with border, border dash, border dash, border dash. Usually there is a syntax associated which is much more terse and much less verbose. That will be something like border colon, and then all the 3 or 4 or 5 attributes that allow you to configure all those borders. So if you don't remember the syntax, right, it's better to always fall back into the one attribute, one property per line. It's also easier to read, right? And if you made a mistake or in source control, right, to keep track of one single attribute at a time. Notice here we're adding some margins, right? We're taking that paragraph and we're using margin. We're adding a 10 pixel margin all around the paragraph. Notice that now we have this empty space, right? From the left, empty space from the right, from the top, from the bottom. This is not the border, right? This is just space between us, right? Don't get too close to me, right? Same thing with the span over here. You can configure either all the margins all around me, above, below, left, and right, or you can be much more specific, and I want to just change the margins on one of the sides, on my right side, my left, the bottom, the top, right? And here, for instance, this particular span, remember there was a little tiny sliver of space here. See that? Here we've said, no, you're too close here, right? So I'm going to push you over 10 pixels, away from me. So I'm adding some space between us. Okay, and finally we have padding. Padding allows it to configure the content inside of the border, right? So inside of the border. So for instance, here we're changing the padding all around in the paragraph. So top, bottom, left, right. But notice that there's a 10 pixel around the entire content, right? Or you can be very specific and just say, I only want to change the left, I only want to change the top, but I want the default of the bottom and the default of the right. So notice that we only have padding above, padding on the left, right? And everything else stays the same. Okay.
Hi everyone, Jose here. Please remember to subscribe and like the video. And if you have any questions, please leave a comment down below. Thank you.